So I'll try and keep this brief, but not rush myself because I don't want to fill it with bullshit words that don't matter. Absurdity. Okay, there is a thing called absurdism, which is like this idea that some of the most absurd things you can imagine end up being true. And it kind of is the backbone of the idea of the concept that truth is stranger than fiction. Um, Engaged in a thread of comments at the moment on Facebook in a group, topic of some recent news about Department of Education potential cuts in budgets or whatever. And I had a bunch of thoughts and listed them out. And somebody who went to my dad's church and is a teacher said that something I said was the least educated thing they'd ever heard. And then used their status as a teacher with expertise as reason why they are an expert and therefore they know what they're talking about. So I've replied and I'm going to see how that goes. In the course of thinking about this, how to reply, so I don't just belt something off, I think 3 or 4 times through before I ever make the post. Was thinking about the absurdity of letting the government dictate what kids learn and what has to be taught and how to teach. Now, some people might say, but it's the government. Government should know better. Some people would say, dude, that's pretty obviously not a good idea. It's kind of the same thing when it comes to the Medicare for All thing. It's like you can't get people to admit that they're just wanting to not have to pay for something that they need, which, I don't blame the sentiment. There's no issue there. But it has to work. Just taking everybody's money and giving them bullshit care because doctors are resentful of the fact that they've been conscripted or whatever. Because the government ain't going to keep paying a full-on price with the insurance industry's rates. That's not going to happen. It's not feasible. It's not logistically feasible. So it's not that I'm against something like that as far as the idea of, it would be great if we had a way that everybody could be treated, but I think it involves robot doctors. Automating all of the bureaucratic process, because to pay people to do that, you've got to charge money. And then everybody wants to, are you going to pay the people that file the information the same as the people that perform surgeries and do diagnosis? So then you'd have to automate the surgery and the diagnosis too. And yeah, that's a whole other topic. So the absurdity of the idea of having the government be in charge of things like teaching future generations how to think, how to be people, because the parents have kind of fallen out of that. Why do we have the authority? Well, it's an appeal to authority, which is a logical fallacy. So it's not really a valid argument to say that you should let the government tell you how to, what to, why to, anything. The government is not God if you're religious. The government is not the laws of nature if you're not religious but you still believe in a fundamental underlying order of some sort. The government is not the law. And the law, as the government presents it, legalities and documents, these are ink on paper and words that vibrate the air molecules so that we hear them. Our ear receptors pick them up and transmit them to the brain, and the brain processes it and then presents it to the consciousness to observe and decide on things. And then the emotional states and sensory data input from that time is then cataloged in memory for future reference. But it's absurd to think that the government should tell people how to think, what to learn, what to teach, how to teach, any of that. Just because an authority is an authority does not make it sufficient or knowledgeable enough. The fact that somebody has passed a class is one thing. The fact that somebody really knows what the fuck they're talking about in that field and has passed the class, that's what matters. So You know, people ask, why don't I trust doctors? Well, let's see. When you go to a doctor, you need a doctor whose interest is in healing, in diagnosing, not in making money, not in what they're doing next week when they go on vacation with their huge yacht or their nice whatever. You know, that's not that's not a doctor that I want to see. A nurse that can barely pass the classes, that's not a nurse I want to treat me. I need somebody that has attention to detail, that can learn, that understands the things, and really grasps so that they can do their job to the best of their potential. That's what we need. But it pays good, so a lot of people want to get paid good, so they do this job, but they're not really qualified or appropriate, but they pass the class technically. So, same thing goes with teachers. Who makes the certifications? Who sets the minimums on the grades? On some level, it's the school, but the school receives funding. There are mandates. There are accreditations. I don't know. There's the accrediting process of schools. There is some sort of consensus. It's the closest thing you can have because there is no higher authority. That's the original idea, is that because there is no true higher authority, we must have consensus for ourselves. It's the needs of the needs of the many and all that. So the less the government is involved in deciding things, the better. And here's why. Everybody now realizes that, I think they realize, most people seem to be realizing, that on some level we've been misled about a lot of things. And when you look at who did the misleading, it comes to mass media, the press, people who convey information and get paid. But underneath of that, there are government influences. Some of these producers of so-called information actually have contractual obligations to consult with the government, and in exchange they get subsidies, tax breaks, or just flat out paid. This is fact. This is not, me just making stuff up. The guy that owns Amazon also owns the Washington Post, and he gets money from the government to consult the CIA before making their stories public. What this means is that the government has its hands in telling people what is real and what is not real via these gatekeepers of information, these authoritative sources that we are told we must listen to because they are authorities. What did I just say about authorities? I'm not going to repeat it. Go back and rewatch the video. This video. We've been lied to. We realize we've been lied to. What else might we have been lied about? That's the question we should be asking. What else might we have been lied about? In 2001, the government became able, via lawmakers signing off on a massive, over 1,000-page act, a law, a bill, that they just all signed and all sent through, that gave the intelligence communities, the portions of government, law enforcement and such, the ability to more actively go after potential terrorists. But the problem is that these mechanisms and processes and systems that were put in place could conceivably be used against individual citizens for being dissenters, for speaking out or saying something unfavorable to the consensus. Except, what is the consensus? The consensus is what a bunch of people who listen to what other authoritative sources tell them to think. And those authoritative sources, who do they take their cues from? I already said that. Go back and rewatch the video if you don't remember 30 seconds or a minute ago. A couple minutes, maybe. They passed this law that allows them to spy on us. It supposedly is passive, but anyone can get a warrant. One of the things that this law created was a surveillance court. It's a private court. You don't get lawyers. The government doesn't even summon you to it. They simply have people who seem to think they have a reason to look at you through this thing, and they take it to this court and they present evidence. And it seems like, from what we've been able to find out so far, they just kind of rubber stamp everything that gets put through. The previous president used this to target. At one point, he allowed the IRS. Somebody wanted to use it to target the Tea Party, and they did. And then everybody said, "Oh, you're crazy," because the news said, "Oh, you're crazy if you think that." And then who does the news take their cues from again? And they said, "Oh, it's crazy. You're crazy if you think that." Well, guess what? Some people that didn't care what what people thought, went ahead and dug into it anyway. And it turned out that they actually did. Freedom of Information Act is also a thing. There are usually sometimes some sort of protections, but you have to know how to use them to be able to use them. So people who knew how to use this did so. And it turned out that the IRS had in fact targeted people based on their political beliefs, which is unconstitutional. Just like the surveillance laws are unconstitutional. Doesn't matter if a higher court, a supposed authority, what did we say about authorities again? A higher authority, supposedly in the courts, has made these pronouncements, and they've had precedents be set with what does and does not constitute free speech, what does and does not constitute violations of your personal privacy, or what is and is not an unreasonable search and seizure. Well, what about like cruel and unusual punishment? Are they going to, what kind of decisions are they going to make on that? Didn't they say that waterboarding was legal? It's still fucking torture. Well, who set that up? The same people that want to spy, the same people that direct the media to tell you what to think. Is it possible that these people are somehow connected to the Department of Education as well? I mean, it's all the government. Well, let's see. Right now, the Secretary of Education is a lady whose brother, I believe, is the founder of Blackwater. Now they're called something else. Private Security Mercenary Paramilitary Firm. There are companies that operate like that for real in the world. It's not just on TV. They maybe not be quite as badass as they're presented on TV and movies, but it's a real thing. A bunch of ex-military get paid to do, basically what they're trained to do, but for money. And it's not for the government, but because they're indoctrinated and people know how to give them the cues, they, do what they're told or whatever. The brother of the Secretary of Education runs pretty much the best known name in that business. She's the one suggesting making cuts. I think maybe she's the one that's got to go. I'm not saying the government should fund everything, but slash and burn without setting up a state and local level, means of collecting money just means that the schools fail and the kids don't learn, and ignorant, poor, unable to revolt or revolt against the wrong thing. Oh wait, that's already happening. But if the government wasn't controlling what's taught in the schools, the teachers could just teach the kids how to think, not what to think. The government doesn't tell them not to do that. If they do, it's under bad faith, false pretenses, because they tell people what to think all the fucking time. So the same government that targeted, it was the same administration even, that targeted political dissidents in the Tea Party, targeted a political rival in Donald Trump. The FISA court, that's that intelligence court that was put in place by the Patriot Act, which is the thing that happened after that, speaking of we've all been lied to, in 2001. But I digress. The same administration even, not just the same government, literally the same government, the same people, abused that surveillance court to surveil a person that they didn't inform the surveillance court they already knew, because he was already an asset of those intelligence agencies that want to spy that all the things that I just already said. I'm just pseudo repeating it here so that it's, still in your short-term memory. It's important. These things are connected. And I don't have to draw a bunch of lines on a map and look like a fucking crazy person. All I'm saying is it is definitely connected. But those memes about the person with the lines on the map looking like a crazy person, who puts those out there? I'm not talking the memes, I'm talking the images they're taken from. The mass media, the culture, that's the TVs, right? Movies, shows. People take these ideas that these people have presented to us and they repurpose them. But oftentimes the original meaning is that's why they use memes. You have a picture of that guy from The Office played by Steve Carell because everybody knows Michael's kind of an idiot. But he says some funny shit that's sometimes true in an ironic way. But there are other places where just to get the laughs, they do the thing like a crazy looking conspiracy person. The fact is, fact patterns are a thing. They exist. A fact pattern is a set of factual information that follows a certain pattern. There is connection between them, not just correlation. The intelligence agencies were granted sweeping surveillance power after the media helped present an event. And then after that, they started spying on everyone, passively, and occasionally targeting people. I won't even get into the rumors of gang stalking, the National Clandestine Service. Ooh, boy. There's a fucking rabbit hole that you don't want to go down. Civilian Enforcement Corps, brown shirts? Are they getting paid? But again, I digress. It is absurd to think that this same government, targeting its political opposition, illegally spying, wiping their ass with the Constitution and the Bill of Rights at every possible juncture. The only thing I can personally think that an organization that behaves in such a way would want to do with the Department of Education is to have it make people be dumber, more obedient, and easier to control. Therefore, as such, they should not be allowed to decide in any way, nor fund, which makes you beholden to. If somebody pays you, they're paying you for something. If they don't pay you, there's nothing you're supposed to do for them or on their behalf. Their expertise is lacking. Their authority is arbitrary. Their motives or intent can only be so many things based on the fact patterns of the way that they conduct themselves. And now, it's not even the previous administration that did all those heinous fucking things, or the one before that, or the one before that, or the one before that, or the one before that. And possibly the one before that. I don't know enough about Jimmy Carter. Everybody has all this shiny shit they say about him. I wasn't even born. But I do know that the last 5 presidents, plus the current one, are basically no different from one another. But they've each changed places, and they've done their own thing. It's almost like a kleptocracy. That they're taking what they can while they're in office, and then once they're out, that's what they got. Power. Not just money, power. Influence. But the power and the influence isn't just with the money you can pay people to do things directly that you want them to do. I'm talking about things like the Department of Education. I'm talking about things like literally state-sponsored media. If they're paying people in the media to have certain standards, they're sponsoring the media. Therefore, they are state-sponsored media presenting information that the state has approved, state being the government, that they have approved to tell people what to think and how to think and why to think it, when they are not God. They are not the natural order of things. They are just people like us. So I'm not claiming any sort of authority. I'm not claiming any particular expertise. I'm simply pointing out facts and fact patterns, using logic to maintain consistency as far as what it appears to be saying. If you make it a language statement, all this facts and logic together, what is it saying? What it's saying is that a reasonable, intelligent person capable of discerning what is overall in the long term better, and not just thinking short-term personal gratification, even in I guess would have to almost be a metaphorical sense to the way that people, they lust after these ideas of the socialized programs that, the government provide and we all pay in and everybody gets the thing. You can't force people to do good. You can't force people to do well, and you can't force people to do right. You can try and teach them that, but who's making the definitions? And the consensus is not an all or nothing thing. It can't work that way. It's not that. That's just not how it is. Nothing is all or nothing. There are no things in there that are like that. Everything is some combination. So now this video has gotten long. I doubt anybody will watch it or will have watched it at this point. At least anybody that matters as far as what got me thinking about this. I find it to be completely absurd that the government should be in charge of anything. Maintaining records, maybe? Certainly not making decisions. Not making decisions for any of us. Not making decisions about what anyone to come should learn. And the fact that this is the way that they're behaving should be a pretty obvious sign, a real red flag, as it were. A real, genuine, bona fide red flag. That they don't need to be in charge of shit. They don't need to be telling us what to think, or why, or how. But you can't mandate good parenting. You can't mandate civic-mindedness or whatever. You can only do so yourself individually. Is there a way for me to impact the educational state of the future then? No, I don't think so. I can simply be me, act the way that I act, and be the best me that I can be. But other than thinking very carefully many times over before making online statements and posts, it's about the only thing I can do. That is all.